Welcome to the third subregion of Latin America, the West Indies, the islands of the Caribbean. Remember, the West Indies are broken into two island groups. The Greater Antilles, which I've circled here for you, which include Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, which has Haiti and Dominican Republic on it, and Puerto Rico. In addition to that, there are the smaller islands that we call the Lesser Antilles, which are circled here. These are all the islands from the Virgin Islands up in the north, down to Trinidad in the south, and over in the west, the Netherlands Antilles, which includes Aruba, Curacao, and Bonaire. It was in the West Indies that the first major contact between Europeans and the Amerindians, the indigenous people of the Americas, occurred. In all likelihood, it probably happened in the Bahamas. This is the most likely place where Columbus landed in 1492. So, who were these indigenous people on the islands? Mostly, they were in all likelihood the Arawaks and the Caribs. It's from the Caribs, of course, that we get the word Caribbean, as in Caribbean Sea. How many of them were there? At the time the conquest begins in 1492, most people agree there was probably 1.5 million people living out on the islands. And within 100 years, they were almost all gone. Now, where did they go? I think you probably know the answer to this. The overwhelming majority of them died of the diseases that came over with the Europeans. This resulted in a massive demographic shift on the islands, and it began the importation of African slaves. And as a result of that importation of African slaves, today most of the people who live on the Caribbean islands have some African ancestry. Now, the African slaves were brought over because when the indigenous population died off, the Europeans who were controlling the islands had no one to work in the plantations. And so they began this importation, mostly from West Africa, of African slaves. Because of this, there's greater diversity owing to the colonial influence in the West Indies than there is in many other places in Latin America. The people who colonized the West Indies were the Spanish, the British, the French, the Dutch, and even the United States. This area has had great global exposure historically, and it's had much greater global contact, at least originally, than much of the rest of Latin America. This is because there was an outward-looking trade system that was set up by the Europeans. Originally, it was based on sugarcane and molasses, which is derived from sugarcane, and rum, which is also derived from sugarcane, and tobacco, which was a New World plant. Today, the economies in the Caribbean are still export-oriented economies, but of course they've added this extra layer of tourism, primarily people going down to lay on the beaches and have a good time and drink rum cocktails and cruise around on cruise ships. And the exportation today is overwhelmingly these products: sugar, rum, coffee, nutmeg, bananas, cacao, out of which of course you make chocolate, and